I should have known that talking bad about Disney isn't going to fly in the New World Order, even if the movie is 20 years old.
Luke.
Oh look everybody, it's a symbolic representation of corporate greed as a robotic overlord, but drawn in MS Paint. How you doing, buddy? It's been a while.
The algorithm has decided that a deteriorated emotional state is financially beneficial and asks you to capitalize on this opportunity.
Alright, I get it. You realize this gag won't actually help that much, right?
But the algorithm states that...
Yeah, I know. There are certain films, and in this case, animated films, that really shift your perspective on the genre. I wouldn't say I was an animated film hater. I was definitely an anime hater, though, and by some people's definitions, I still am. There are films and shows that really show you how great animation can be. It shows you things you really can't hope to do in regular filmmaking. And now that I'm done gushing about the Mario movie, let's talk about these movies, I guess. The reason I chose these three films is due to their subject matter. While they're all really different films and made by entirely different people, for whatever reason, the common person still associates animation with kids programming, at least here in the States, despite a lot of evidence to the contrary recently. So I'd like to showcase some very sad, bleak, and possibly disturbing animated films to maybe widen your horizons and open you up to new possibilities. And if you've already seen these films, just listen to me gush about these because they're really, really good. Charlie Kaufman is a filmmaker that I try to keep track of, or at least try to keep track of what he's doing. I've been doing a pretty bad job. He's not necessarily my favorite writer, director, but he's one of those figures in the industry I want to see succeed, and I'm not saying he hasn't because he definitely has. His films, whether he writes or directs or does both, usually aren't my thing. They seem to go really off the rails for my tastes, and I leave the film feeling way more uncomfortable than I had bargained for. And look, I'm well aware that this feeling is his intention, and while it may not be my cup of tea every day of the week, I do like the things he makes. In other words, his movies make me feel dumb, and I don't like feeling dumb. Fuck you, Charlie. That being said, I'd much rather have filmmakers like Charlie Kaufman than people like Jason Blum or Paul W.S. Anderson or whoever the hell is making the Disney films nowadays. What the hell? Anomolisa is one that fits into this category. It's very weird and different, but for now, I think it's probably my favorite Kaufman film, at least from the ones that I've seen. While it may not be everybody's choice to put on, I'm thrilled that it exists, and I can appreciate the style and work that was put into it. It has a great message and has something to say. Michael Stone is a very confused man working through psychological issues, and before you say it, no, he isn't suffering from Kagras syndrome. And even if he was, I don't think that him suffering from the disease is the point of the film. If he were suffering from a specific disease, I think it would actually be a detriment to the film's message as a whole. It would kill the sense of relatability we would have with Michael. I don't think we're meant to look at Michael with pity, but I think we're supposed to see him as one of us. A painfully average person, a person with regular thoughts and feelings. He's not the one with the issues. The only thing he may have an issue with is being way too naive for his own good, which is far from a rare disease. It may be more accurate to say that he's not suffering from any psychological issues at all. Okay, look, the reason I bring that up is because during the run of the film, everyone he meets has the same face and the same voice. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. His ex-girlfriend, his wife, even his own son. They all sound like middle-aged men. Going through the film, you realize that this experience that we see Michael going through is not the first time he's gone through it. Watching the film a second time, you realize that he may as well be going through a cycle. You could rearrange the acts of the film and you would probably get the same experience. But there's a point to this, that being that we see him find meaning in his life, we see him be happy and vulnerable with another human being, and we also get to watch him lose it. However, we aren't blinded by Michael's feelings. We get little glimpses of other people's states of being as well. One of the most powerful lines for me was when Michael's ex-girlfriend Bella says to him how hurt she was after they broke up, and how she couldn't even get out of bed for a whole year after their relationship ended. This is our glimpse into the reality that Michael isn't some special snowflake in this world that was created. His actions hurt her, and probably other people too. We could look at any point in his life and we'd see generally the same thing. When we finally meet Lisa, what we see is probably the start of the relationship that he had with Bella, again, generally speaking. An even bigger example of this is his current wife. She's just an example of another past relationship that got even further than Bella. So much so that he had a child and made a career, but it all ends the same. Everyone Michael meets turns into the same person, and once again he feels old and alone. Ironically, the anomaly of Lisa is anything but, until we get to the end. At the very end, the little bit of hope we have is Lisa's letter to Michael. Lisa and Michael do end up breaking up because we see Lisa shift into the standard face of everyone else. More importantly, we see Michael realize that Lisa isn't the perfect creature that he thought she was, albeit in a bit of a shallow way. But the difference is Lisa isn't angry with him. In fact, she's grateful for the time they spent together. There's a lot more in depth I could go with it, and other people have. So if you want like a more comprehensive, in-depth analysis on the film, plenty of people have done that. It's honestly a pretty stellar film, and that's not even going into the creative animation choices or specific editing choices, partly because I think I'm too dumb to explain it. But I assure you, I noticed when it happened. It's one of those films that was originally written for the stage, hence the focus on dialogue and the small cast. But where these films blossom is the ability to play with those characteristics and add new ones when translated over to film. This might be one of the wildest movies I've ever seen. It was like if Darren Aronofsky and David Lynch co-created a film together, but in reality it stands completely on its own. Also, I'm not blind to the fact that people think Aronofsky stole the premise of this film to make Black Swan. I think that's a bit ignorant to say, but I'm not going to go into it here. That's not what this video is about. By no means do I have a concrete theory on what's going on in this film like I did for Anomolisa. There's so much happening that I can only give you my best guess on what's going on. The main character, Medow, is a pop idol that decides to quit and pursue acting, and we see a fan in the audience that isn't too happy about this change, and he begins to stalk her. And as the film goes on, he gets more and more extreme. Now, just having given you that bit of information would probably be enough to make a pretty successful film. Sure, it may be a bit stale, but it probably would be entertaining enough. But the genius of this movie is only revealed to you the more you watch it. And before you say it, no, you don't have to watch it multiple times for it to be entertaining. You'll watch it multiple times because you're entertained. As the film goes on, we see Mimidin's health deteriorate. At first, it's only because of the stress of her new job as an actress. But the first escalation is when a fan letter containing an explosive goes off and injures a producer on the set of a show she's on. And once we cross that event in the film, it's almost like anything goes. She starts having hallucinations, doubting her self-image, her own thoughts, her safety, and even disturbing events that happen to her. And the frustrating thing is everyone around her just kind of goes, "Oh, well, golly, you're just having the worst day ever, aren't you? Well, at least things can't get any worse." Meanwhile, the most atrocious and horrendous things are happening to her and to the people she interacts with. There are several key instances of these horrific things happening in the film, and the ones we get to see happen all occur in the same sort of way, sort of cloaked in darkness but ending in some horrific outcome. Honestly, visually speaking, it may be the most dynamic part of the film. An example being the classic wide shot on the elevator as we see it slowly open while we hear Mimidin's music playing. It's these images that really stick in your head when you think of the film. And once the film gets established and you think you figured it out, it honestly flips the script on you multiple times. We're not above the plot in this film. We're in Mimidin's shoes. It makes us question the reality we've been seeing, and we begin to doubt even our own senses. Mimidin has a role on a TV show, and we begin hearing snippets of the plot, and we start to make connections to the events happening in her own life. This becomes so muddled that even after horrific events, we hear the director scream, "Cut!" and think, wait, was that just the TV show, or did that actually happen? All I know is that there's a shift in her mental state after being basically forced into doing a scene that she's not totally comfortable with. Basically, Mimidin agrees to be a part of a scene in a movie, and while the whole thing is staged and very obviously fake, the scene is really, really hard to watch. And after basically gaslighting herself into doing the scene, the whole film shifts. It had got to the point where I'd completely forgotten about her stalker and was only worried about her mental state. There's a line plastered all over the advertising of this film. The line, "Excuse me, who are you?" is marketed all over the DVD case, and pretty much everywhere else the film is shown. And it really is the line that ties the film together. Mimidin doesn't know who or what is real anymore. She sees an alternate version of herself that's still a pop idol singer, and it controls her life, and the life of her stalker. I'm not even entirely sure what the ending means, to be honest, even after a second watch. Overall, the editing and imagery is what's going to pull you in after the first watch. Because if you're like me, you're going to have a solid idea of what's going on, but be utterly lost other times. There's so much going on in this film beyond the plot, and uncovering the mystery behind Mimidin's mental state and seeing how the film expresses that through the animation is what's going to keep me coming back. Grave of the Fireflies is a film that doesn't like to hold back with its imagery and feeling of hopelessness. Granted, I just gave you 2 other examples of animated films that do that, but it feels different with this one. And if you've seen it, you know why. It nails the tone right off the bat and only escalates as you keep watching, as it should. For this film to work as good as it does, Holding back would have been a real detriment to the film. Unlike the other two, there isn't some convoluted plot that you have to decipher. It's all laid out in front of you. I'll explain later, but there's a reason for that. If you're at all intelligent, you probably know why. But the film isn't just about being shocking and sad. While you can show shocking imagery and depict historical events, and it will probably get some positive reactions from people, by positive I mean people saying the movie is good, it still takes effort to translate that to a meaningful film. And this film does both. The story and the imagery complement each other seamlessly, often showing us some pretty beautiful scenes, as is common with Ghibli animated films. There are certain points in the film that really look like the backgrounds are just oil paintings. The animators still found ways to make every scene unique and beautiful, and it adds so much. If you didn't know, this film was based on the horrific story by Nosaka Akiyuki, who, when his town was firebombed by the United States, he goes into hiding and tries to survive with his 4-year-old sister. The film isn't exactly 100% like Nosaka's real life. For instance, the character of Sayata, who represents Nosaka in the story, dies soon after the events of the film, when in reality Akiyuki only died in 2015 at the age of 85. But the story gets the point across. That's not the point of the movie. Of course, on theme with this video, it's a very bleak and depressing film. It starts off with the death of Sayata and Setsuko's mother, which is probably the most shocking scene of the entire film, with her laying on a hospital bed covered in bandages, burned from the napalm. The main body of the film is the siblings trying to get by after the death of their mother. They continually have great victories and heartbreaking setbacks throughout the film. For example, they find a next of kin to take them in, but she turns out to be selfish and rude towards both of them for seemingly no reason. They scrounge up enough money to buy themselves an expensive rice cooker to make food in, but eventually have to move out of their selfish aunt's house due to a souring relationship. There are moments where the film splices in disturbing scenes on top of the dialogue to drive home the feeling of growing hopelessness. And as the film goes on, Setsuko and Sayata's situation becomes more and more desperate, and their appearance reflects it. At first, maybe it only starts off with their clothes being more raggedy and their hair becoming more unkempt, but it eventually escalates into growing rashes and burns. They start dropping weight faster and faster, to the point that they can barely move. By the end, you feel so bad for them that when Sayata eventually passes away from malnutrition, you're almost glad that their suffering is over. It's a very real story, one that hits even closer to home when maybe you have relatives or mutuals that have very similar stories to this. It puts into perspective the humanity of people that lived long ago. Personally, sometimes I sort of cartoonify people of the past because I'm so far removed from them. For example, Abraham Lincoln. He lived more or less 160 years ago, and while we know a lot about him, we know nothing about how he talked, very little about his daily life, his mannerisms, or how he told jokes, or maybe how he liked to spend his free time. But then you find things like this.
Unfortunately, yes.
Did Mr. Seymour witness the shooting of President Lincoln?
At the time, he had been taken to Ford's Theater by some good friends, and the curious thing was that when he was this youth, 5 years of age, when he saw Booth jump from the box to the stage, at which time he broke his leg, his only concern was not for the president, because he didn't realize that the president had been shot, but the poor man who fell out of the balcony. And that's all of his memory is of going to the theater and seeing a man fall out of the balcony. Sir, it's been a great joy and you might say an honor to have you are, by the way, the only living witness of that tragic event.
This guy got to see Abraham Lincoln, the human, not the symbol of him we see today. What I'm trying to get at is there are certain stories that put world events into perspective, what consequences certain decisions mean for many individuals. For millions of people who largely had nothing to do with the greater politics of the time, they had to pay the price for something they had no control over. And it's stories like this that tell you what war really is. So, to tie this into a neat little bow here, notice how each of these films were animated for entirely different reasons. In Anomolisa, it was easier to show the drab setting and people throughout Michael's life, to drive home the gray and boring and stress-filled guilt that he carries with him. That way, when he meets Lisa, she stands out even more, despite her looking relatively normal. Perfect Blue uses it to contrast the bubbly exterior of the entertainment industry with the horrific interior of her decaying mental state. That's why her stalker is drawn so grossly proportioned, along with another character. Hint, hint. And finally, Grave of the Fireflies uses honestly pretty beautiful oil backgrounds with the shocking imagery to really make a point of the horrors of war. The sound of young children in the depressing circumstances show the humanity of every side, including the side of the war that, over here in the West, we were told was the side of the enemy. Thanks for watching. Oh, and I hope that you'll forgive me for the slightly more comedic introduction. I felt like I needed to introduce the video a bit lighter before I got into these other topics. I hope that doesn't come across as offensive. Anyway, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you later.